Hello. Sometimes fate takes everything from a person, their family, their home, their name, their future. But at the very moment when it seems like everything is over, a chance appears to go back and change the course of history. I pinned all the chapters in the playlist.
The pervading smell of blood, the scent of blood emanating from the corpses scattered throughout the mountain was attracting all sorts of wild beasts. Caw-caw crows, gathered in flocks, circled in the sky, biding their time. The horrific scene seemed to betray the desperation of the battle. It was impossible to count how many bodies lay sprawled about. Nevertheless, those who survived did not cease their movements. As if driving prey, they advanced uniformly towards the mountain's summit. And at the summit of the mountain, there, those who had already finished the drive, their eyes sharp, pointed their acute sword tips at a man. Ha ha! A man of imposing physique stood there. However, his appearance was beyond description. From his face to his feet, a dark crimson blood dyed his clothes so thoroughly that their original color was unrecognizable. His entire body was riddled with cuts and stab wounds. Furthermore, dozens of hidden weapons were embedded in his back, dangling precariously. These were injuries that would normally lead to immediate death, but the gaze directed forward was like that of a fierce beast. Before him stood several figures. Their eyes, looking down intently, were cold. Soon, one of them threw a cloth bundle before the man. The bundle rolled over, unraveling before the man, revealing the severed head of a person. The moment he confirmed it, the man, who seemed as if he would never collapse, fell. With trembling hands, he caressed the face of the one who had been with him for so long. Chu Hyanga. With this one, all the family members who supported the young master are dead. At someone's words, the man held his breath. It was a subordinate like a close friend who had been with him since childhood. They had survived together even when the family collapsed, and despite having the chance to leave, he remained by his side and protected him. It wasn't just Chu Hyang. Over the past decade, the faces of those who had helped and hidden him, even after the family's ruin, flashed through his mind one by one. The death of such a person made the man's eyes tremble even more. It's been over 10 years, young master. To think the day would come when this chasing game ends. Swoosh! At those words, the sound of swords being drawn was heard. Then, approaching footsteps pierced his ears. At the sound, he raised his head and looked at the men. He looked at the men whose eyes were full of life, unlike the eyes of one who was dying. Hoyun Jinin, Ju Yomchan, So Guhayan, Yom Jihak. He uttered the names of each man aloud. Their expressions twisted each time their names were spoken. It seemed they hadn't expected him to remember them, given their fleeting past encounters. Your memory is quite exceptional, young master. Well, that's probably why you managed to survive in our grasp for over 10 years. Ha ha ha, ha 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 dash. Following that, a frenzied laughter erupted, spreading across the entire mountain. Despite facing death, there was no hint of fear. Instead, he confronted them with dignity. The man staggered and struggled to stand up. Ha ha ha, what's 10 years? What's 100 years? Even after 1,000, 10,000 years, I will chase you relentlessly and tear you apart. With your blood, I will dye Dongting Lake, and this fight will not end until your lineage withers and burns to ashes, even if it's hell. Ha 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 dash. The man spat out curses, bleeding, and laughed again. The laughter of the man, dignified even in the face of impending death, echoed throughout the mountain. At that moment, the man took out a curved jade pendant, subtly glowing green, from his bosom. It emitted a mysterious energy that seemed to draw one in the moment they looked at it. Simultaneously, the eyes of the figures watching him widened greatly. That is, the startled individuals hastily began to move, but their movements were futile. The man shoved the curved jade pendant into his mouth and bit down on it. Crunch, crunch, dash. As he chewed the hard jade pendant as if biting on taffy, fragments of the broken jade tore his mouth. Blood flowed freely from the man's mouth with each chew. Were they overwhelmed by his spirit? No one moved, watching the jade pendant shatter in real time. What are you doing? Take it away quickly. Gasped. Those who regained their senses from the shocking situation hastily rushed forward. Drip, but the man, bleeding, merely smiled, as if finding their pale expressions utterly amusing. Soon, he hesitantly stepped back and spread his arms wide. Even if I die, I won't die by your hands. With the somber sky at his back, the man mumbled, looking at those approaching. It was a faint sound, hard to make out over the clamor, but the situation was clear to all. No! The man's body plummeted straight down the sheer cliff. An outstretched hand barely grazed his sleeve. Soon, all that could be seen was the endlessly falling figure of the man. Thwack! Before long, something crushing echoed. Where one must crane their neck to see, there lies a throne for the Absolute. The Absolute being, seated ass rescue, propped his chin, looking down as if bored. Towards him, who seemed to be gently closing his eyes, attempting to sleep to overcome boredom. No one among the gathered dared to raise their head or open their mouth, simply prostrating themselves silently on the ground. Flash dash. At that moment, the man's eyes opened. His gaze swept over the scene before him, taking it all in at once. Countless individuals were prostrating themselves, worshipping him. The man's eyes slowly turned to his surroundings. A strange sense of déjà vu, as if he had experienced this before. Feeling that, he looked at his wrist. A single, dark red curved jade pendant, subtly glowing and captivating, came into view. The man slowly raised his hand and looked at it, as if handling the most precious object in the world. His gaze and expression were so peculiar that it seemed as if he had lost everything to the jade pendant. This was not unique to the man alone. Among those prostrating, those who, without realizing it, raised their heads to look at the curved jade pendant, all gasped roughly, feeling enchanted. That was it, the stone imbued with divine power. Just looking at it made one feel as if they could encompass the world. However, the man's eyes, looking at it, gradually narrowed. Crack. Soon, as he tightly gripped the curved jade pendant in his hand, it shattered into countless fragments, scattering like dust, and then, strangely, slowly began to be absorbed into the man's body. Small exclamations were heard from various places. However, this absolute being did not even grant permission, disregarding those who raised their heads or opened their mouths. He merely cast an indifferent gaze, recalling the vanished curved jade pendant. Then, he became certain of one thing. Something is wrong. He couldn't remember, but this déjà vu was providing the answer. That something was gravely wrong. "Young master, are you all right?" A forgotten, familiar voice echoed in his ears. Instantly, at the sight of the old man before him, he unconsciously opened his eyes again. An old man with a benevolent expression. He watched the man, who was looking down at him with worried eyes and speaking, for a moment, then unconsciously reached out his hand. Thwack! "Oh my dash! I'm dying! Why, young master, why are you suddenly like this?" The old man tumbled, and another beside him shouted. He turned his head with a bewildered expression, and a familiar face came into view. A tall stature that could easily be called 8 feet tall. Overwhelming muscles that one wouldn't expect from a servant. It was Jang Chu-hyang, whom he had seen in his final moments. "Chu-hyanga, no, it's me. But why are you suddenly like this? Why hit Elder Hong?" Elder Hong. The words registered, but his mind couldn't process the situation. He stared blankly at the fallen Elder Hong, then shifted his gaze elsewhere and surveyed his surroundings. A familiar room. It was so large that spacious couldn't even begin to describe it. Every single item decorating the room was precious. It was clear that selling just a few would amount to a commoner's salary. "My room?" Cough dash incomprehensible situation. He suddenly burst into a cough. Slowly, he turned his head and looked at Jang Chu-hyang again. Looking at him, he saw the fellow wearing a puzzled expression. "Is your head all right?" Looking at the fellow tilting his head, he slowly reached out his hand. The moment he touched his cheek, memories from the past flashed through his mind. He unconsciously pinched the fellow's cheek. "AR dash!" A piercing scream echoed in his ears. As if to prove that this was reality, it was incredibly vivid. He stood up unconsciously, looking at the fellow flinching and pulling back his head in fright. "Cough, cough!" He coughed again, but this was no time to be blankly coughing. "Young master, oh dear, why is he like that? I don't know either." Thump thump, he hastily exited the room. The moment he passed through the familiar corridor, past memories resurfaced vividly. Each time, his breathing grew heavier, his breath caught in his throat, and he simply ran and opened another door. Instantly, a scene unfolded before his eyes. A place too familiar, too longed for. Cough! A peach blossom spring, Talyunsheng, unfolded before the grand gate. To anyone, it was a harmonious blend of splendid flowers, trees, rocks, and ponds, seemingly arranged for one person living beyond the gate. It was so beautiful that one couldn't imagine it was made for just one person, truly like a painting. He slowly left that place and went outside. Then, a vast expanse of land, difficult to take in at a glance, as if an imperial palace had been placed there, came into view. Based on the cardinal directions, main halls managing merchant guilds, escort agencies, and inns were built, and at the center of it all was the Jin family of Luoyang, overseeing everything. And this place, where he stood, was a separate annex permitted only to the young master of the Jin family of Luoyang. What happened? Cough. He trembled at the corners of his lips and slowly began to look around. It was certainly burned down and everyone was dead. The Jin family of Luoyang, the absolute financial powerhouse that had wielded control over the money flow of the Central Plains for hundreds of years. And he was Jin Cheonwoo, their youngest son. This place should have long since vanished, not even a cornerstone remaining, so why was it here, perfectly intact? He simply couldn't comprehend it. He thought it was merely a dream, but that wasn't it either. The wind that tickled his neck, the scent of grass permeating the air, the bright sun, nothing could be false. "How are you, young master? Are you feeling better today?" He heard people's voices from all over. Familiar faces, those he had seen since childhood and those who had died. He unconsciously clenched his fist. Could it be he had returned? It was a situation that defied common sense. But no matter how he thought about it, this didn't seem like a dream. The appearance of the people, their voices, the surrounding scenery, and even the sensations he felt. Everything was so vivid that he couldn't accept it as false. He held his breath and fell into thought. Because of what? There was nothing he could be certain of. Then, something suddenly came to mind. At the same time, he hastily quickened his steps. Moving swiftly along the wide paths of the Jin family of Luoyang, he headed towards a hall built on the highest ground within the family grounds. Ancestral Hall Zushirdan, a sacred place where only direct descendants of the Jin family of Luoyang were permitted to enter. He opened the tightly locked door of the ancestral hall and stepped inside. Countless ancestral tablets were visible, but that wasn't what he wanted. The deepest part of the ancestral hall, the floor. When he opened it, a small box appeared. Phew! He slowly took a breath and opened the box. With a click, the moment it opened, there was a curved jade pendant. To be precise, it was not the mysterious green glowing curved jade pendant, but one that seemed to have lost its life. Soon, with a gentle breeze, the curved jade pendant turned to dust and vanished without a trace. Ha ha ha! He looked at it and let out a hollow laugh, then slumped down, looking at the ancestral tablets with an absurd expression. If people knew of such an ability, there's no one who wouldn't covet it. Indeed, it sends a person back to the past. If people learned of an object with such an absurd ability, anyone would go mad with desire. That was the reason the family had suffered destruction. Whether it was martial artists or those in power, it was enough to make their eyes burn with greed. Above all, he finally understood why those bastards had so desperately sought the curved jade pendant, even risking their lives. He recalled the vanished curved jade pendant and held his breath. There was certainly more than one. Considering how those bastards had moved to retrieve them, there must also be curved jade pendants with similar or entirely different powers. He organized his thoughts, stood up, and lit incense. Thanks to it, I received help. It wasn't just help. It was a situation where he had resolved to die. Even if he had jumped off the cliff and miraculously survived, in that state, he wouldn't have lasted even half a day before his breath stopped. But what was the conclusion? He survived, and he even returned to the past. Of course, if there hadn't been a curved jade pendant in the first place, the family wouldn't have been annihilated, but regardless of what happened, he couldn't deny the fact that he survived through the power of the curved jade pendant in the midst of the unfolding events. Cough cough, he coughed, chuckled, and slowly left the ancestral hall, heading back towards the family grounds. The scenery he had always seen in his childhood unfolded before his eyes. A vibrant courtyard, a sanctuary where no one had died or been burned to ashes. Looking at such a place, a sentimental feeling welled up within him. His eyes seemed to redden, but he quickly composed himself again. The shadow of death would still be approaching. Cough cough, he coughed again. Wiping his mouth, he saw blood on his hand. This alone was clear. 1 year before the family's destruction, he was already poisoned and physically weak. Thanks to this, he collapsed every day and coughed incessantly. He remembered the hardship of countless physicians visiting and checking his pulse, yet failing to find the cause. He chuckled, thinking such thoughts. Would a mountain once overcome be difficult a second time? Cough. This time, you won't have it your way. He clenched his fist. His fingernails dug into his flesh, and he felt blood flowing. But it was all right. This too was proof that he was alive. My physical condition was not good. This was because the poison had accumulated slowly over a long period, so the toxicity within my body was considerable. I had no intention of using a physician to cure it. From the outset, there were few physicians capable of such a feat. Of course, one physician who could treat it came to mind, but I had no idea where he was at this time. Therefore, there was only one method I could choose: perform internal cultivation to prevent the poison from progressing further. I sat down in the lotus position. I had practiced martial arts since childhood. However, I hadn't seriously delved into them, and as it was a family martial art, it wasn't of a particularly high level. I could tell just by looking at the small, millet-sized energy I felt in my dantian. I let out a small chuckle. You'll die if you keep that up, you bastard. Though it was a brief encounter, the face of the one who had taught me many things came to mind. He recognized Chu Hyong's talent and wanted to take him as a disciple, which had allowed me to gain considerable benefits. Though he mostly poured his efforts into Chu Hyong, the occasional casual remark or two he threw out gave me clues, allowed me to break through bottlenecks, and eventually enabled me to dismantle and re-establish the family's martial arts. Now, where would he be? Thinking that far, I chuckled. I didn't even need to think. It was obvious. I shook off the distracting thoughts and refocused on my internal cultivation. Water Moon Heart Cultivation, Soyue Shingong. I slowly began to circulate my internal energy according to its flow. My internal energy was weak, so detoxifying the poison immediately would be impossible, but I could certainly prevent it from progressing deeper. I concentrated as much as possible, finished my cultivation, and opened my eyes. In that instant, something familiar was in front of me. What are you doing? Zhang Chuhaiyang was staring intently at me, sitting in the lotus position. It was absurd enough that he had come in without permission, but it was even more ridiculous that he had been staring at me like this for so long. You startled me. Get your face out of here. Am I a ghost? Startled indeed. More importantly, what are you doing? Meditating. Enough of that. What is it? Well, it's mealtime, and you didn't answer when I called. I don't feel like eating much. Forget that. Where is father? I think I need to see him briefly. You know, and you ask, didn't he leave to lead a large merchant caravan? And mother, of course, and even the family warriors who wield swords went with him. At his words, I nodded. I had a hunch, but my memory was correct. He had left with the family's skilled warriors to lead a merchant caravan. Naturally, this was also the time when my older brother and sister had left with other merchant and escort caravans. This was why my physical condition continued to worsen. With only the head steward left to protect the family, the shield that could protect me had almost disappeared. Nevertheless, the reason I could survive with a poisoned body was thanks to a certain woman who would soon arrive in Luoyang. But I couldn't just wait until then. You, Chuhaiyang, I told you to bring the young master. Why are you so late? At that moment, a resounding voice was heard again. Soon, the half-open door swung wide, and an old man entered. It was an old man with one eye bruised black. This was Hong Guhaiyan, who managed the servants in the Jin family of Luoyang. I looked at him and smiled awkwardly. No, what do you want me to do when he just woke up now? Wake him up. I said I didn't think I should wake him up. Who in the world shouldn't be woken up? The two voices intertwined and echoed in the room. It was so noisy I wanted to cover my ears. I unconsciously frowned, and only then did Hong Guhaiyan look at me. Ahem. I apologize, young master. It's because I didn't educate this boy properly. No, rather, I apologize. It's because of me, isn't it? Ha ha ha. It's alright. Compared to when I took a sword for the young master before, this is nothing. Indeed, that happened too. I looked at Hong Guhaiyan and recalled the past. There was a time when I was young, ignorant, and reckless. Because I had abundant resources and was always in a position to command people, I thought everyone in the world was beneath me. Because of that, I once got into a fight with a wandering swordsman, and the enraged fellow, without thinking, swung his sword. And the one who took it for me was none other than Hong Guhaiyan. I thought of that and smiled. Thanks to you, I lived. I'm grateful. Ha ha ha. I'm more grateful that you say so. More importantly, you should eat. I see you've been coughing a lot recently. It's because you haven't been eating properly. No, forget that. There's something more important than food right now. I'm going out. Chuhaiyang, get ready. Ah, you're not eating? I'm hungry. Let's eat outside. I feel like going to an inn after a long time. Let's go right now. Oh dear. As Zhang Chuhaiyang's eyes sparkled and he hastily began to prepare, Hong Guhaiyan, watching from the side, let out a long sigh. There are quite a few famous inns in Luoyang. Among them, Anrayong in Yunlong Kerjan was always one of the top 5. Operated by the Jin family of Luoyang, it was famous for having both delicious food and a great atmosphere. And though expensive, it was a perfect place for the wealthy to flaunt their money. On the other hand, another pride of Luoyang was Weizian in Huashen Kerjan. Strictly speaking, it was probably the oldest in Hunan. Being an inn that was hundreds of years old, its history still lived on from that era. Also, its food was decent and its prices were cheap, so it was a place often sought out by people who wanted to enjoy a meal without burden. I entered such a Weizian inn. I saw that many people had filled the seats. Thanks to the many delicious and affordable dishes, it seemed not easy to find a seat, but the feeling was strange. I felt the gazes of the people eating. Isn't that the young master of the Jin family of Luoyang? Yes, that youngest young master. Why is he here? Anrayong Inn is right nearby. How strange. I heard whispers from several places. It was understandable as Anrayong Inn, operated by the Jin family, was not far, so there was no reason for me to specifically seek out Weizian Inn. Is the inn Weizian by any chance? Cough, cough. Weizian is also an inn. Ah, well, yes, but Anrayong is more delicious and elegant. I thought we were going there. At Zhang Chuhaiyang's words, people frowned. For taste and atmosphere, Anrayong was indeed the place. Most of those who sought out Weizian did so because Anrayong's prices were high, so his casual remarks seemed to sound like he was showing off his wealth. I shook my head and went up the stairs. I went up to the second floor, but there were no seats there either. But I didn't give up and moved to the third floor. As I ascended the stairs, I suddenly felt a shadow fall over me and looked up. At the entrance to the third floor, a sturdy man stood blocking the way. This place is off limits, young master. Please go downstairs. I came to meet someone inside. Do you have an appointment? Of course not. Then you cannot meet them. The man spoke firmly and showed no intention of backing down. What should I do? I coughed, exhaling the rising phlegm, and took out my money pouch. I grabbed a few silver coins at random and threw them towards the man. The man, surprised at the sudden silver coins, widened his eyes, and I gave a small smile and urged urged him on. Cough, go tell them I've arrived. Understood. Money, they say, can even move ghosts. Moreover, for a man in a place like this, trying to earn a few small coins, 4 or 5 silver coins would be enough to make his eyes turn. I saw the man, his sturdy demeanor from earlier gone, bow respectfully and quickly enter. Who are you meeting here? Yes. No, why on earth? Who are you meeting that you're spending money like that? You said you didn't even have an appointment. Someone worth spending that much on. Ha! Zhang Chuhaiyang looked at me with a puzzled expression. He tried to understand my utterly incomprehensible words, but soon seemed to give up and shook his head. At that moment, the man who had gone inside returned. The man bowed respectfully, just as before. They will see you. Please enter. Thank you very much. I smiled and followed behind the man. At the end of the long third-floor corridor, the largest door swung wide open, and the interior was finally revealed. The bright room scenery, so splendid that even gorgeous couldn't fully express it, caught my eye. And at the end of that gaze, a woman sat. The woman wore a splendid black palace dress that suited the room and looked at me with an alluring expression. Smiling temptingly, she rose from her seat and gestured to an empty seat next to her, looking at me. As I took my seat, she gracefully sat opposite me. What brings you to such a humble place, young master? Humble? This place is good enough to rival Unryong Inn. Ho ho, I'll take that as a compliment. But truly, what brings you to me? This woman was the owner of Weizian Inn. She was also one of the top 3 beauties in Hunan. Although she was clearly not a Jising whose name was registered in the Jising registry, quite a few people intentionally sought out Weizian Inn just to see her beauty. It was because the owner was a woman of such beauty that Weizian Inn was even more famous. I chuckled softly and opened my mouth towards the woman. I want to find someone. Ho ho, young master. We sell food. Clink. Before she could finish her sentence, I threw a silver ingot onto the table. At the sudden appearance of a silver ingot, not just silver coins, the woman widened her eyes in surprise and looked at me. I'm looking for a physician, one who wanders throughout the Central Plains, treating people. Their appearance is so, young master, no matter what you say. Clink. As she opened her mouth again, I threw another silver ingot. 5 taels of gold. Their face is severely scarred from burns and pockmarks, making them quite unsightly. They say they treat the powerless and suffering in the shadows rather than ordinary people. Young master, you're not listening to me. I want to know where that woman is and what she's doing now. If you find out, I'll give you twice the current price. Cough. Zhang Chuhaiyang was making a fuss beside me, but I completely ignored him and rose from my seat. I had already said what I needed to say. Seeing her eyes waver at the sight of money, this woman would surely bring me that information. Moreover, hadn't I even promised a reward if she succeeded? Even though I had turned my back and was leaving the room, I felt the woman silently watching my back, and I chuckled, turning my head. In that instant, our eyes met. I saw the woman flinch. Oh, by the way, I spent a lot of money, so won't you give me free food? Ha? Ho ho ho, of course. Prepare a seat for him. At the woman's words, the man waiting outside the door bowed. Baek Jinhwa watched a party through the window. Their hurried departure caught her eye. One of them was so famous in Luoyang that there was no one who didn't know his face. After all, he was the youngest young master of the Jin family of Luoyang. The person beside him was a servant who had been with him since childhood. It was unclear what they were talking about. The servant was incessantly opening his mouth, and the man was frowning as if he didn't want to listen. Jin Cheon-woo. He wanted information, not food, from the owner of Weizian Inn, who was right before his eyes. He even paid a massive sum of 2 silver ingots, as if he knew she was affiliated with the Hao Gate. The unbelievable situation was exasperating. Of course, it wasn't strange to know about the Hao Gate, but to speak as if he knew Weizian Inn was a stronghold of the Hao Gate and was certain of everything was another matter entirely. What on earth is it? Baek Jinhwa confirmed the sketch Jin Cheon-woo had drawn while eating. Indeed, as the young master of the Jin family of Luoyang, he had received all sorts of education from the most talented individuals since childhood, so his calligraphy and painting were quite good. It was a level difficult to compare with the sketches displayed on the streets. Hong Mei. Yes. As Baek Jinhwa quietly opened her mouth, the door opened and a woman entered. As she stood silently as if waiting for orders, Baek Jinhwa handed her the sketch she held in her hand. Find her as quickly as possible, and who she is. I'm very curious as to what kind of woman she is for the young master of the Jin family of Luoyang to be searching for her with such a huge sum. Understood. Feeling the woman's presence disappear, Baek Jinhwa took a breath and thought of Jin Cheon-woo. He was clearly known as a prodigy, but she had heard that he had recently been in poor health and confined himself. It seemed true that he was called a prodigy. His aura was ordinary, but his eyes were not. She felt as if she was being overwhelmed by his spirit. For now, should she try to find her? Her eyes began to gleam with with interest. No, why are you doing this, really? How much did you spend? On the way home, Jang Chu-hyung's incessant voice beside him was noisy. It was so loud that even if he covered his ears, he could still hear it, making him want to cover his mouth. Of course, he did not know the boy's feelings. Although he had gotten a meal, he had spent a huge sum. 2 silver ingots were a large amount that ordinary people couldn't save even if they worked for several years without spending. It might seem excessive for obtaining just one piece of information, but given that she was the woman he needed most right now, it wasn't too great a cost. However, the boy's chattering voice was too loud. He frowned. Be quiet. You're too noisy. If you have money to throw around like that, give it to me. The chirping of the sparrow was truly painful to his ears. Finally, with a sigh, he took out a silver coin from his money pouch and tossed it. Ha! Take it. Are you really giving it to me? I'm giving it out of gratitude. Have you finally understood my heart? But what do you have to be grateful for? He had stayed by his side until death, protecting him. It wasn't something that could be dismissed with a mere silver coin. If he wanted money, he could give him enough to last a lifetime, and if he needed anything else, he would obtain it by any means necessary. He owed him an unpayable debt to that extent. But right now, even this feeling was a luxury. They were definitely coming. Stopping them first was the most urgent matter. Let's go home for now. Yes. Thanks to a mere silver coin, Jang Chu-hyung became quite obedient. Just by looking at his beaming smile, he seemed quite excited. And so they returned home. They went deep into the large Jean family compound and headed towards the annex. The moment he opened the door to the room he had finally arrived at, a strong scent of incense wafted out. It seemed the maid had cleaned the room and lit incense. However, because the window hadn't been opened, the smell lingered very strongly. As he entered with a frown, he saw a meal that had been prepared at some unknown time. It was placed as if it was ready to be eaten at any time, but quite some time had passed and it had grown cold. Seeing that, Jang Chu-hyung's face contorted fiercely. At that moment, a voice even angrier than his was heard. What in the world is that foolish person doing? Lighting incense like that, and the meal has grown cold, hasn't it? How dare you leave cold food for the young master to eat? Booming dash. Hong Gu-hyen's loud voice echoed mightily. It seemed he had followed him after seeing him enter the room, and upon confirming the scene inside, he erupted in great anger. It wasn't just a casual remark about being the head of the servants. Since Hong Gu-hyen managed all the servants and maids in the Jean family of Luoyang, when he roared, it meant there was something wrong with them. Hong Gu-hyen, his face flushed red, entered and opened the window. Then, looking at the cold food, he shouted at the maids who were hanging laundry outside. What are you doing? Not taking the food away quickly. We apologize, elder. Do you apologize to me? We apologize, young master. We were wrong. At the harsh scolding, the maids' eyes welled up with tears as they hastily moved. Not one of them dared to make an excuse, merely apologizing, showing Hong Gu-hyen standing among the servants. He chuckled faintly and waved his hand. It's fine. I ate outside so you can clear the food away. And next time, don't light the incense like this. Ah, yes, thank you, young master. We will be careful next time. Seeing the maid scrambling, Hong Gu-hyen's eyes now turned to Jang Chu-hyung. Flinch. Jang Chu-hyung was intimidated by the sharp gaze. He was a coward, unlike his appearance. What are you doing? You're just following the young master around instead of working. Wasn't it your job to teach them here? No, the young master told me to go out. An elder too. Be quiet. How dare you talk back? You good-for-nothing country bumpkin. Ah, come on, you're being too harsh. Go quickly and work. Don't be lazy. Ah, alright. With a weary expression, Jang Chu-hyung bowed his head and hastily moved. Besides assisting him, he was actually very busy, handling all the general affairs of the annex. He chuckled faintly and sat down. Cough. You don't have to get so angry. Why do you say such things? Those who are supposed to assist the young master are not doing their job properly, so they should be scolded. More importantly, is your cough still bothering you? Should I call a physician? No, it's just a slight cough. It's fine. I don't have a fever either. If your condition worsens, I will call a physician immediately. Since both masters are absent and everyone else is out, isn't it my role to assist the young master? Haha, thank you. By the way, I want to rest a bit. Understood. Please call me anytime if you need anything. That Chu-hyung fellow is rather unreliable. As he nodded, Hong Gu-hyen bowed respectfully and went outside. After confirming that he was far beyond the window, he casually lay down on the bed. Cough, cough. Suddenly, a cough erupted. It was a cough even worse than before. The continuous coughing made his abdomen ache and his throat hurt. He felt as if he would vomit even dry retching. About a shigyong, 2 hours, passed like that, and he felt it gradually subside, so he took a breath. Then, he rearranged himself on the bed and sat up. Squinting his eyes and checking his surroundings, he felt a few presences that had been lingering disappear. They must have been maids or servants cleaning. He gathered his thoughts and began his internal cultivation again, slowly guiding the millet-sized energy he felt. He felt a slight sense of relief in his body. Chirp, chirp. When he opened his eyes, it was already morning. He confirmed the sunlight streaming through the window and rose from his seat. He definitely felt lighter than yesterday. His mind was clear, and his sluggish body felt quite nimble. It seemed he had succeeded in blocking the poison to some extent through internal cultivation, just as he had initially planned. Of course, he didn't think it was completely cured. He had only done what he could with his millet-sized internal energy. He had done his best. The problem was how long he could hold out. He smiled bitterly and looked at the copper mirror, seeing that his complexion had slightly improved. He no longer looked like a patient to anyone. He clenched and unclenched his fist and slowly moved his body. There was a slight stiffness, but it wasn't so strenuous that he couldn't bear it. It seemed he could push himself a little without issue. Good. He nodded, satisfied with the situation. Soon, he turned his gaze to the window. Numerous maids and servants were bustling about the courtyard and inside, busily working. Their naturally integrated appearances were no different from usual, but like the presence he felt yesterday, someone would surely be watching him. I can't keep this up forever. He couldn't continue to play in their palms. The problem was that if they observed his complexion and physical condition with even a little interest, they would realize that the poison was not working, which meant he didn't have much time. If they knew the poison wasn't working, they would resort to stronger measures. In the current situation, he wanted to avoid that. He sat on the bed and swallowed. Time was continuously flowing, making it urgent, so he judged that prolonging this any further would be meaningless. Then he had to strike. He had to sweep them away in one go. Only by cleanly sweeping them away without leaving a single one would he have time to catch his breath. He organized the thoughts in his head and rose from his seat. To sweep them away, he needed power. However, the power he currently possessed was not great. Then he just had to use something else to compensate for what he lacked. Unlike in the past, he still had something to draw upon now. He opened the door and went outside. Many people greeted him, confirming his face. He also smiled back at those who smiled, but undoubtedly, some of them would be pointing their blades at him. He composed himself again and continued walking for a long time before finally stopping. One of the large halls. This was the office of Chief Steward Yu Hyan. He opened the door and entered without any prior notice. Yu Hyan, who had been working, turned his head towards him. Oh, isn't this the young master? It seems like a long time since I've seen your face. With his father absent, Chief Steward Yu Hyan was managing the family. Thanks to his outstanding capabilities, he was called his father's left arm, and he was smoothly leading the family even in his father's absence. He also did not doubt Yu Hyan's abilities. He subtly smiled and sat down in a chair. Cough, cough. I'm glad to see you too, Chief Steward. It feels like more than 10 years since I've seen your face. Ha ha ha. 10 years? I saw you just 4 days ago. You're telling a funny joke. By the way, is there a reason you came to see me? You don't need money, I presume. Even if I needed money, I wouldn't borrow it from the Chief Steward, so rest assured. More importantly, when are my parents coming? As far as I know, it will be at least another month. It might even be longer. That's because recently, bandits have been rampant in that area. He nodded at those words. Indeed, it was the same back then. The time was extended due to clashes with bandits. Thanks to that, he couldn't receive any help. Couldn't be helped. In a situation where they were deliberately obstructing, even his father wouldn't have an easy time. Perhaps you came to ask that? Cough. Do I look that idle? Ha ha ha. No, I don't think so. So, what's the main point? He silently looked at Yu Hyan, who was smiling. He paused as if thinking for a moment, then spoke in a firm tone. Please send me some guards. Only those I choose. And very discreetly. Who guards, you say? What's the matter? I will tell you later. Doubt appeared in Yu Hyan's eyes at his words. He was asking for guards out of the blue, so naturally he was curious about the reason. He might also have wondered if he was trying to show off his strength somewhere. He chuckled faintly and looked directly at Yu Hyan again. There was no right of refusal. Moreover, he had no intention of allowing time to be wasted by unnecessary curiosity. Above all, there was no way to persuade him anyway. Time was gold for him right now. I will not accept any more questions. And this is not a request, but an order as the young master. Yu Hyan's gaze, looking at him, subtly began to change.